What's going on, everybody? Hope you guys are doing well today. And I want to take a video here to talk a little bit about it's not an elephant in the room with the Seattle Seahawks because I don't think a lot of people are thinking about this. And I don't want to act like this is some massive pivotal moment for the franchise when they make their decision here. But I do want to discuss one particular player as we go into the home stretch of this season and make our way eventually towards the offseason. I don't know if we'll get there after week 18 or after a playoff game or more than one playoff game. I don't know when it comes, but it will come. The offseason comes for every single team, even the team that wins it all. It comes for them just as it comes for the worst team in the league. So let's talk about Dre'Mont Jones a little bit. And again, I'm not calling this an elephant in the room, but I think that we as Seahawks fans should look at this and think about it for a second here because there's something kind of interesting going on here that I, as a Seahawks fan, wasn't really expecting, and I don't think a lot of Seahawks fans were expecting either. And some would argue that it might be a little bit of a fugazi. It might be a little bit of it's something that you look at and then you go, oh, well, it's not real. And then there are other people who would look at this and go, oh, well, it doesn't really matter. It's not like this is going to change anything. But let's talk about Dre'Mont Jones a little bit here because for a while now, it has been assumed that Dre'Mont Jones is a goner in this upcoming offseason. He will not be a Seahawk in 2025. And I still think that's probably the case. And I still think that is overwhelmingly likely to end up happening sometime this offseason. So I'm not here to say that I don't think this should happen anymore or I don't think this will happen anymore. But let's talk about this for a little bit here because something kind of interesting is happening here where, look, first, we're looking at Pro Football Focus, and let me just go ahead and get this out of the way now. Pro Football Focus hates Dre'Mont Jones. They have never really graded him well. They didn't even really grade him well when he was in Denver. When he was in Denver and considered a really good player and was considered a coveted free agent in the 2023 offseason that the Seahawks made one of their biggest free agent splurges ever on. So I'm not so much looking at Pro Football Focus to tell me how good he is. Because if you ask Pro Football Focus, they'll tell you he is bad. And I'm not saying that's without credence. There are certainly bad things about this player, but let's go beyond just that. So, fact number one. Over the last 6 Seattle Seahawks games, so ever since the Niners loss, and then you have the Falcons, Bills, Rams, Niners again, and then Cardinals, Dre'Mont Jones has been getting pressure on the opposing quarterback a lot. 6, 5, 3, 5, 4. He did get shut out against Buffalo, but nobody got pressure in that game, if we're being real, right? Like, who got pressure in the Buffalo game? There were a couple, but realistically, nobody got pressure in that game. So if you're going to hang somebody for that, then hang them all. But we're talking about 11, 14, 19, 23 pressures in the last 6 games. Now, that's Pro Football Focus. You guys know. I think that Pro Football Focus is way, way too easy giving out their pressures. They give out pressures for anything. They'll give you a pressure if a air molecule that you expel is inhaled by the quarterback anytime in the following 24 hours after the play is over. But theoretically, the lax standards of pressure should apply to every player equally. And you're not going to find that many players in the league with 23 pressures over their last 6 games on Pro Football Focus. That's almost 4 pressures a game. And he's done this even though he's not playing a copious amount of snaps. He played a lot against the Falcons and Niners, but then he was far more limited in his snap count against the Bills, Rams, Niners again, and Cardinals. So it's not like he's doing it because he's just getting massive volume to work with. So something is going on here that is good. And again, some of these pressures probably not the most impactful. But that goes for everybody. That goes for everybody that Pro Football Focus looks at, or at least it should. I don't think the person who's looking at Dre'Mont Jones's tape on Pro Football Focus is like his... It's not like it's Dre'Mont Jones's brother or something. It should be somebody who is at least somewhat objective. And fact number 2, according to Pro Football Focus, Dre'Mont Jones leads the Seahawks in pressures. He has more than Boye Mafe and more than Derek Hall. Now, Mafe would definitely have more if he had played in every game. He did miss some time, so that's got to be taken into account here. But as of right now, Dre'Mont Jones, with 34 pressures on the season, actually leads the way. So, while he is clearly a flawed player, and he's been, I think, correctly criticized heavily by Pro Football Focus for his run defense this year, he's doing something right to get those kinds of numbers. And then you have fact number 3. And this is the thing that I think is most interesting, because Dre'Mont Jones is a certain kind of player, and that kind of player does not have a lot in common with the way the Seattle Seahawks have utilized him this season. Here's what I'm talking about. If you go over to alignment snap counts over on the right side of the Pro Football Focus page here for 2024, you'll be able to see where Dre'Mont Jones is lining up relative to other players on the field on every single snap. You have A gap, which is basically a nose tackle. You have B gap, which is basically a 3-tech. You have over tackle, which is kind of like maybe a 4-eye guy. Basically somebody who, he's not like an edge, but he's kind of an edge. I think you guys know what I'm talking about. He's not somebody who's lining up outside the tackle. He's lining up over tackle. And then you have outside, which is, of course, outside the tackle. Yeah, Dre'Mont Jones is really only doing one thing right now for the Seahawks. He's lining up outside the tackle. He is lining up as an edge rusher. I mean, what are we talking about here? Is this 80% of the time, approximately? Somewhere around there, right? That's about 80% of his snaps getting taken as an outside rusher. He lines up over the tackle about, 5 times a game on average? And he lines up in B gap about once a game. So basically, not trivial. It's dismissible. You don't even need to really look at that. Little bit of stuff over tackle, but realistically, he has become a pure edge rusher this year. And I say become, because that's not really what Dre'Mont Jones is. You go back to 2023, his first year in Seattle, and you bump over to the same columns, you will see that the Seahawks initially had a very different approach to how they wanted to utilize Dre'Mont Jones. In his first 8 games, he was being used primarily as a defensive tackle lining up over B-gap. He was basically a 3-tech. In every game he played, those first 8 games, he lined up in B-gap significantly more than anything else. And when he wasn't in B-gap, he was mostly over tackle. He basically never lined up outside the tackle at all. He lined up outside the tackle, less than 25 times over those first 8 games? And then injuries happened, Nwosu got hurt, and we were forced to bump Dre'Mont Jones outside most of the time. And you can see that while he was still lining up in B-gap and over tackles a little bit, the switch flipped, and he became basically a full-time edge rusher for the rest of the season. Though still not as extreme as this season. And that's notable because you go back to 2022, which was his final year in Denver, and the year that ultimately got him paid by the Seahawks, that got him that $51 million contract. You look at the alignment snap counts, it's pretty much even. He lines up in B-gap, and he lines up outside the tackle about an equal number of times, and then he lines up over the tackle a little bit more. You've got 200 over B-gap, 200 outside the tackle, 300 over the tackle. So they kept it pretty even in terms of his usage. And that was how he had his most success when he was in Denver. And like I said, this was the year that got him paid. This was the year that made us want him as a player. Because even this year, he did not get good PFF grades, mostly because he was considered a poor run defender. But I still look at this and I go, this is what Dre'Mont Jones should probably be doing. Now, the reason why this has happened is very obvious, right? Like the switch flips after 8 games here. It's very easy to figure out why. Uchenna Nwosu got hurt. We didn't have somebody else that could fill in as an edge rusher. We tried to bring in Frank Clark. It didn't work. So we just had to say, hey, Dre'Mont, you're taking one for the team. You're going to be lining up in a spot that you're not used to lining up in. You're going to be lining up outside pretty much full time because we need another edge rusher. And guess what? Uchenna Nwosu has not really made his way back this season. So it makes sense, right? Like, actually, the game he lined up over tackle the most would be the Lions game. Remember, that was one of the games where we had so many injuries in our front seven. We were just desperately trying to throw people around, trying to find something that could work a little bit. So that's probably a big part of why we saw 13 over tackle snaps from him in this game. But when we have deployed him this year, it's very clear what the priority is. So he's probably playing out of position. He's probably doing stuff that he's not comfortable doing. And when you put all those things together, when you put those 3 things I just said together, I think it's fair to ask, is Dre'Mont Jones starting to, I don't know, I don't want to say justify his contract and play up to his contract, but is he starting to be a valuable net positive player that helps you when you have him? Are we at that point yet? Because whatever the grades may say, this guy's generating pressure at a pretty good rate, and he's doing it seemingly playing out of position. And let's think about next year, okay? And look, keeping Dre'Mont Jones next year, that's hard, right? Dre'Mont Jones's contract kicks in next year, like really kicks in. His base salary is nothing this year. Next year, it's $16 million. He's got a cap hit next year of $25.6 million. That's almost 10% of the cap for a guy who is not only not a superstar, not only is he not a star, he's not even really like a great player. Maybe he's good. Maybe. More than likely, he's okay. Not a guy you want to be giving $25.5 million to. But at the same time, it's not about the 25.6. It's about 11.6, because those are approximately the savings if you move off of him. Because the dead cap hit for him next year is 14.1 if you move off of him. And you can't really move that money around because he only has 1 year left on his deal. So you're just going to take it on. So you're not really thinking about, is Dre'Mont Jones worth 25.6? What you're thinking is he worth 11.6? Because that's the decision you're making. It's actually slightly less than 11.6. Let's call it 11.6. So with everything that I just said, keeping in mind that next year, the Seahawks still going to have Boye Mafe almost certainly, still going to have Derek Hall. Those guys might even develop a little bit and get a little bit better than they are. And either Nwosu's going to be back and hopefully be healthy and actually be able to have a full season, or Nwosu will be gone and we'll probably bring in somebody else. I think there's a very good chance we use our first round pick, or at the very least a day 2 pick, on an edge rusher. I think that McDonald and Schneider are going to find somebody they like, and they're going to bring them in. I think they're going to want to keep that room moving and keep that room fresh with young players. And one way or the other, the edge crop room in 2025 should be deeper, and that will allow Dre'Mont Jones to go back to a steady diet of playing on the inside. And that seems to be where he is best. So is Dre'Mont Jones playing his way into getting 2025 with the Seahawks? Can we afford that? Can we make that work? Can we find a way to justify keeping him around, keeping in mind that the savings if you move off of him is only 11.6 million? Maybe you can move some of that money into void years. You already have significant void years on Dre'Mont Jones the next 2 seasons after that, 2026, 2027. You could tack on more and it's still not that bad. Like, what is, if you were to throw some of this cap hit into void years in like 2028, 2029, just to get it down to like maybe 20 million? Who cares if you're going to be looking at like a 2.5 void year cap hit in 2028? That's going to be like 0.5% of the cap. That's going to be barely over 0.5% of the league salary cap, right? So you could do that, and that's not even something you're really going to blink at when you get there. So you could just do that again. You could do that for a few more cap void years. You could maybe tack on to the void years you already have. Like, there are some options here that are going to make this at least passable, at least survivable. And I mean, I know people are kind of getting sick of this guy. I know this guy's very unpopular in the fan base, but I think this is a conversation that we as Seahawks fans should be having. Is there a way to justify his return in 2025 and in a better situation with a better edge rotation that will allow him to move around on that defensive front and not be relegated to play full-time edge where, I'm sorry, he's just not meant to play? I know that McDonald likes bigger edges, but Dre'Mont Jones, the thing is, he's a bigger edge, but he doesn't really have the strength that comes with that, so it's not like he even has the benefit of being bigger. So I think that he is actually, I gotta say it, doing a really good job of overcoming this problem with the Seahawks roster and still providing, at the very least, positive play. I'm not going to say great or good necessarily, but it's been positive. And we would not be getting through these games the way we are right now without him. As weird as that sounds. We could not survive the Uchenna Nwosu injury if Dre'Mont Jones wasn't there giving us something. So, yeah, wanted to go ahead and talk about this. I think it's worth talking about. Let me know what you guys think. I know this guy's not popular, but at the same time, there's no getting out of this cap hit, guys. This cap hit's going to be big whether or not he's here. So, do we want him here at least able to earn it? Or do we want to save $11.5 million and go find somebody else who, I mean, unless it's a rookie, unless it's a really good rookie, is not going to be this good. Like, and it might have to be a really good rookie. Whatever little you think of Dre'Mont Jones, at least he's a veteran. You know what he can do. All right. See you guys later. Go Hawks. Just something to think about. And I want to hear what you guys think.